Good morning. Good morning. Can I ask you to take your seats? We will start this press conference. Apologies for this late start. Uh, as you know, ministers are quite busy during these days, so we have some conflicting meetings at the same time. But happy and glad to see you all here today. So welcome to this press conference on services domestic regulation. My name is Jaime Kogi. I am the DPR of Costa Rica and chair of the GSI on domestic regulation. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Manuel Tovar, Minister of Foreign Trade of Costa Rica. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jaime. Good morning to all. Thank you very much for gathering here this morning, and I hope that Geneva is treating you very well. We're here today to welcome the United Arab Emirates, Georgia, and Timor-Leste as new participants of this joint initiative on services domestic regulations. Here with us today, I am delighted to have with us today Mr. Juma Mohamed Al-Qaid, Deputy Minister of Foreign Trade of UAE, Mr. Gennady Arveladze, Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia, and Mr. Joaquim Amaral, Coordinating Minister of Economic Affairs and Chief Negotiator of the Government of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste as an observer to the WTO. Welcome. Allow me to thank here also Jaime Kogi, the coordinator of the joint initiative, for all his great work on guiding this negotiation towards success. I must say that I'm very proud of you, Jaime. On 2nd December 2021, despite the challenging circumstances due to the postponement of MC12, 67 WTO members adopted a declaration to announce the conclusion of the negotiations on services domestic regulation. The outcome that this group of members has reached is about enhancing the transparency, predictability, and efficiency of licensing and authorization procedures, with a view to facilitating trading services. By now, all of the participating members have circulated their draft WTO services schedules to incorporate the outcome on services domestic regulation. This is a very significant achievement. I am also pleased that participating members are making good progress domestically to get ready for the launch of the WTO procedures, which will give legal effect to this outcome by December 2022. Before I hand over the floor to the ministers, allow me to recall a few key points. First, this outcome marks the first plurilateral initiative to be concluded out of those launched at the 11th Ministerial Conference in Buenos Aires. It is also the first WTO result in the field of services in 24 years, a real success story for this organization. Industry and business, both big and small, from around the world strongly advocated and supported this outcome, which provides a concrete response to the bureaucratic and procedural problems they report in their trade operations. What is more, research published by the OECD and the WTO suggests that the benefits from implementing the new commitments and services domestic regulations will result in significant reductions in trade costs of $150 billion annually, particularly in important backbone services sectors. And implementation is also likely to generate broader trade benefits for economies, such as an increase in services trade, as well as more engagement in global value chains. Without further delay, let me please pass the floor now to the Deputy Minister of Foreign Trade Affairs of the United Arab Emirates, Juma Mohamed Al-Qaid.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Your Excellency, Minister Manuel Tovar, and and thank you also, Hemi, for your great efforts. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I am here today to announce the United Arab Emirates' decision to join the declaration on the conclusion of the negotiation on services domestic regulation of 2nd December 2021. We are confident that being part of this outcome will support the UAE's long-term trade policy strategy, whose top priorities are creating an environment conducive to trade and investment, strengthening our competitiveness in external markets, and developing international trade relations. As the second largest economy of the Arab world, the United Arab Emirates continues to diversify its economy to reaffirm our positions as a regional trade and investment hub. For this, it is essential that our regulatory system is conducive to business, that is predictable, transparent, and free of red tape. These are clearly the objectives that have guided negotiations in the joint initiative on services domestic regulations. And the implementation of the disciplines that this group of the WTO members have agreed last year will help us to further align our framework of laws and regulations toward best regulatory practice. Minister Tover, I am very glad to hand you the UAE's draft WTO services schedule incorporating the disciplines on domestic regulation, which confirms our commitment to the work with the other participating member for the entry into force of this negotiated outcome by the end of 2022.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
As a strong supporter of the rules-based multilateral trading system, the United Arab Emirates is proud to be part of the joint initiative on services domestic regulations, the first plurilateral initiative to succeed and first outcome in the field of services in a very long time. Thank you, Minister Trevor, for Costa Rica's leadership in this great WTO achievement. Thank you very much.
Now, please allow me to pass the floor to Deputy Minister Arveladze from Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Tover. It's great pleasure for me to be here today. Thank you also for all the participants, honorable deputy ministers. Georgia underscores the relevance and critical role of international trade and the WTO in global economic recovery, and Georgia also is a responsible member of the WTO, committed with its values and principles. We are targeted in achieving maximum openness, transparency, regional and global integration of our economy. Services trade has grown considerably in the past decade and is estimated to now account for around half of global trade. Furthermore, various reports found that the costs of trading services are about twice as high as trade costs for goods. The joint initiative on services domestic regulation established at the margins of the 11th WTO Ministerial aims to develop disciplines to mitigate the unintended trade restrictive effects of measures relating to licensing requirements and procedures, qualifications, requirements and procedures, as well as technical standards. In December last year, as it was highlighted by Minister Tover, 66 WTO members adopted a declaration announcing the successful conclusion of negotiations on services domestic regulation aimed at increasing transparency, predictability, and efficiency of authorization procedures for service providers doing business in foreign markets. WTO members currently participating to this declaration represents 90% of global services trade. However, I'm delighted to announce that relevant internal discussions on the joining the declaration has been completed by Georgia, and we are ready to accede to the initiative in the margins of MC12, and today's event is a good declaration of this. Disciplines contained in the reference paper of the declaration is greatly aligned to the rules and procedures introduced to the domestic services regulatory practices in Georgia. Transparency and predictability, as well as the maximum removal of bureaucratic boundaries for services providers, is one of the principal approaches in Georgia as overall trade policy. All the relevant regulatory institutions and agencies in services sectors ensure to publish and make available all the necessary information required for business operators to comply with the requirements and procedures for authorization, including the electronic means. Every agency responsible for the issuance of services-related licenses and permits provide the package information, providing every information essential for businesses, including regulatory fees, application procedures, and timelines, and other related requirements and procedures. Legal certainty and predictability is also very significant. To this end, Georgia has established a number of electronic portals like the Legislative Herald and Parliamentary Web Portal, as well as specific related web pages where every interested party is allowed to access any service-related legal documents, even on the drafting level. Moreover, various related stakeholders are enabled to engage in the elaboration of relevant laws and regulations and provide comments that are taken into account. Georgia commends the new declaration and once again expresses its readiness to join, and also calls for other members towards the accession to this initiative, which will bring more transparent and predictable domestic regulatory practices, as well as ease the burden for business operators and greatly facilitate and simplify the authorization procedures and help them meet the requirements in timely manner. I would like now to deposit to Costa Rica and also thank for all the efforts that has been made and facilitated by Costa Rica.
Thank you, Gennady, Deputy Minister Velatze. Now, allow me to pass the floor to Minister Amaral from Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Minister Manuel. Good morning for you all. It is a great honor for me to announce the Timor-Leste intention to join the GIS group. Timor-Leste is firmly dedicated to becoming a member of the WTO as part of our Vision 2030. For Timor-Leste, integration in the multilateral trading system is a venue for fostering economic diversification, growth, and enhancing the living standard of our population. We have made very good progress in recent months with other WTO members on our accession package, and we are committed to conclude this process by early next year. We are aware of the importance of open and contestable markets, which are underpinned with the sound application of good regulatory practice. As a WTO acceding country, this is a very important for us because it is clear that an efficient and transparent regulatory framework is a key to enabling and facilitating trade across borders, and will benefit particularly the many small and medium enterprises established in Timor-Leste. In light of this, we have looked closely at the outcome achieved in the context of the joint initiative of service domestic regulation in December last year. And what we found is that the disciplines that this group of WTO members have agreed upon resonate fully with the steps we are undertaking to improve our domestic business environment. We are therefore very glad to announce today Timor-Leste decision to participate in the joint initiative on service domestic regulation. We are confident our participation in this outcome will not only further shape and consolidate internal reform towards good regulatory practice, but it will also signal that Timor-Leste, a least developed economy, is ready to fully engage in the multilateral trading system. We are committed to join the declaration on the conclusion of the negotiation on services domestic regulation, and will enter this commitment in our working party report, which will be part of our assessment package on the WTO. As a least developed country, we hope that the initiative participating members will provide us with the support we needed to fully implement in this outcome upon our graduation from LDC status and reap the full benefits from its application at the domestic level. We are very proud to be the first least developed country to express our intention to be a member of this group that deliver a concrete and meaningful outcome for the benefit of the services business community. Thank you for you all, and thank you for the Costa Rica efforts to support everything that Timor-Leste can join this group. Thank you.
Thank you, ministers, for announcing your decision to join this important initiative on services domestic regulations. And congratulations to the three of you on the news that you will shortly circulate your delegation's draft WTO services schedules incorporating the new commitments on services domestic regulations. With the United Arab Emirates, Georgia, and Timor-Leste, the number of participants in this initiative now amounts to 70 members, 70 countries, who together represent 92.5% of global services trade. That's quite impressive. Economies at all levels of development are part of this joint initiative, developed and developing countries, members alike. And with Timor-Leste, we now also have the first least developed country to be part of this group. Congratulations, Timor-Leste. We encourage other least developed countries to join us, noting that they will only be required to integrate the domestic regulation outcome in their WTO services commitments once they graduate from LDC status and are fully prepared to implement it. This means that members at various levels of development from different regions of the world and with different regulatory capacity and approaches all see clear benefits in being part of this deal. It also shows that this outcome provides the necessary flexibility and policy space to ensure it can be implemented in line with each member's regulatory objectives, while providing business with the transparency and predictability they need to be able to trade. The initiative remains open, transparent, and inclusive, and any other WTO member is welcome to join. With this, let me now open the floor to any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Ministers, for your preliminary, these introductory remarks and for your remarks. I would now like to open the floor for any journalists that would like to raise questions. Please identify yourself by your name and also your media company you work with. Is there any question? I see Washington Trade Daily, Ravi. Ravi, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Minister. for your initiative. I just want to raise a couple of issues. First, the actual number of countries that have joined or this joint JSI is only 43 if you take European Union as 27 members. Second question is that have you not undermined actually the WTO's multilateral working program on domestic regulation? Because that is an ongoing program which you have successfully undermined it. And, you created this plurilateral. The JSIs have no legal status, and to expect that you will this will get into the main multilateral agreement is a difficult choice. Lastly, Minister, the JSI, the domestic regulation in services is a very complex issue, and what you have negotiated doesn't quite enable, for example, the movement of Mode 4 personnel into the industrialized countries, and there are sufficient domestic limitations in terms of encouraging Mode 4, which is the most unaddressed services sector in the global trade.
Thank you, Ravi. I don't see you in the room, but I do hear
No, I'm at home.
It's online.
He's online. Okay, okay. So first, for your first question, I must say that all 67 participants have submitted their draft schedules. The EU schedule is one submission, but it covers the 27 EU member states which are also members of this organization. As for the your second question, I must say that this assessment is incorrect. This outcome is not attempting to deliver on the mandate for a multilateral outcome on services domestic regulation under WTO service agreements. We tried to deliver on this mandate for many, many years, but by 2017, it became clear that there was no broad-based support for this kind of outcome that we have today. This is why a group of 59 WTO members agreed in MC11 through a joint statement to pursue negotiations on services domestic regulations in a dedicated forum outside the WTO committee responsible for progressing the multilateral mandate. Last December's outcome was concluded in that dedicated forum. We still hope a multilateral outcome will be possible on services domestic regulation in the future, and we hope that last December's outcome can provide a stepping stone and momentum in that direction. As for the third question, I will pass the floor now to DPR, Mr. Jaime Kogi.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, the question was related to the Mode 4. I just want to clarify that these negotiations were, it's about domestic regulation, it's about disciplines on domestic regulation. We are not conducting here market access negotiations. It's only related to disciplines and good regulatory practices. Saying that, the disciplines themselves provide better regulatory practices in terms of licenses and qualifications that can also foster the trade on Mode 4. So it's also related to Mode 4. So it's not that it's completely linked from Mode 4, but we are not negotiating here market access commitments. With that,
I just have a couple of questions. One more question, please.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your clarification on the Mode 4 issue. But when Mode 4 issue is generally talked about, it's not so much about market access as about the domestic regulation barriers imposed, particularly in the US, EU, and most of the developed countries. That is where the developing countries suffer most. I'm not talking of market access, but it's regulatory barriers. I have also a question for the UAE minister. Namely, you have submitted your application for the 13th Ministerial Conference. Has there been any support for your proposal in this meeting?
Could you please repeat the question? But it doesn't seem.
Yeah, sorry.
To the, yeah.
The UAE minister, the question is very simple, that you have submitted your application to host the 13th Ministerial Conference in Dubai. Has there been any support for your proposal at this ministerial conference?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. As any WTO members has the right to also to submit a request to host the ministerial conference, the UAE has took the first step. This is initial step, and officially requesting the WTO to host the ministerial conference in Abu Dhabi. So there is a process still ongoing in the WTO, and I think yesterday already the number of countries has already expressed their support of hosting the ministerial conference in the UAE. So we are ready, and we hope that the outcome of this process will end up with a decision that the host country for the MC13 will be the UAE. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I pass the floor to Hannah Moniken from the Inside US Trade, who is participating as well online.
Good morning, ministers. Yes, Hannah Moniken with Inside US Trade. I just had a clarifying question, which is that I believe you mentioned that least developed countries are not required to implement the disciplines until they've graduated from LDC. But it also sounded like Timor-Leste was saying that they were putting it in their accession package. So I was just curious to hear if they are planning to implement these immediately, or if it's going to be more of a transition period for them.
Timor-Leste. If you want to refer to that question on the implementation.
Thank you for the question raised by the U.S. delegation. Yes, as LDC country, we have to pass through the transitional periods. That's why we are in the process to conclude our processing. To the assessment process. That's why we look at the good opportunity to join the GIS group that could help us also to speed up the domestic reform to fulfill our compliance in the WTO process. That's why we continue believe that the GIS group, the regulation of GIS group that's given the Timor-Leste should pass through the transitional period. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. If I can complement that answer, I'd just like to remind that LDCs are not expected to take any commitment before their graduation from least developed countries. Of course, the fact that Timor-Leste shows it's willing to join this is a very good signal for your accession process, and also for the investors and for business. Upon graduation, you can designate, they can designate any necessary transitional periods they require. With that, I would like to conclude this press conference and thank you all for being with us today. Ministers have other commitments. So with that, thank you very much for giving with us today. Thank you.